Good morning, Mayor Rogers. If you would go ahead and test your audio and visual, please. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hey, Mayor, can you check your audio for us?
Good morning.
Hi, John.
Morning, John.
Hey, Mayor.
Let's go ahead and call to order, and I'll go ahead and chair until Eddie's able to join us, if that works for you, John. All right, let's call the roll.
Eileen, can you hear us? Hold on a second. Let me just make sure she can hear us.
Sure.
Oh, Madeline, can you call the roll for us?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Member Sawyer,
Here.
Member Rogers,
Here.
and Chair Alvarez is absent. Let the records show that Member Sawyer and Member Rogers are present.
All right, let's go ahead and go to our public comment for non-agenda items. If you have a comment that is within the purview of our downtown subcommittee, but is not on today's agenda, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom.
There are currently no hands raised for public comment.
Okay, I'll bring it back and let's go ahead and jump into item 3.1.
Okay, for item 3.1, we actually have a bunch of folks here. I believe Amy Nicholson and Claire Hartman and we're about to promote everybody and Jen Santos, I believe, are the ones who are going to be presenting this, and as well as Jesse if needed. And I think they're all up, if not almost up. And then Malin or Eileen, can you put the presentation up as well?
Absolutely. I apologize. There's a little bit of a glitch happening. Hopefully it will open in just the next few seconds for us.
We're having a few technical difficulties today.
The beauty of Zoom.
I know, but Claire's going to start. And she's on.
I'll start. Good morning, everyone. I'll introduce the team that we have for the first item, and then while we get the slides up. So we're going to provide an overview and an update on where we're at with the, thank you for that, where we're at with the downtown residential fee incentives. This is a package of 3 resolutions that was passed by the city council back in 2018, which we just realized yesterday was 4 years ago. Time flies. The team that we have today, though, there's 2 of us presenting, but obviously we work together to look at how this program is working. So Jen Santos, Deputy Director of Parks Division, and I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development. We'll provide the overview, but on this package of incentives, we've been working with Raisa Del Rosa, Alan Alton in Finance, Jason Nutt, and also Amy Nicholson and Jesse Oswald from PED. So next slide. So just as in terms of background, like where these initiatives have come from and in what context, it really kind of started back in 2016 when the city council adopted the Santa Rosa Housing Action Plan. And as you remember, this was a plan that was multifaceted. It actually had 5 different program areas. We knew that addressing housing in Santa Rosa really had to have sort of this comprehensive all hands approach. And so that was adopted to kickstart 31 initiatives, and one of which was to address fees and incentives for downtown housing. So in support of that plan and other ventures, the council had adopted downtown housing in particular as a tier 1 priority. And then about that time, we had the Tubbs fire. We retooled and promoted and really made a concerted effort to focus on downtown for housing with a number of sort of supplemental initiatives or ones that furthered the housing action plan. And we created what we call the up downtown, and I like to call it a toolbox. I'll go over that in a minute. Obviously, subsequent to that, we also adopted the Resilient City Ordinance, which was citywide, but had a lot of concerted, deliberate moves in the downtown in particular for reduced review authority, focusing on design, but streamlining housing. And then it was shortly after that, we adopted the 3 resolutions that make up the downtown residential fee incentives. And shortly after that, we adopted the downtown stationary specific plan, which was an update from a 2007 plan. And it had very swift moves to support housing, such as going to FAR and reducing or eliminating minimum parking standards, just as a couple. And then housing for all has been maintained as a council goal. So we've, even though it's not just downtown, it has housing for all and across the city, but still has a concerted effort focused on downtown housing. Next slide. So our up downtown package, if you will, or toolbox, like I said, it's dependent on multiple facets to make housing work. And I think all of us can attest, working with developers who work in our downtown, they pretty much use all of these. And when you ask, which ones do you use the most, they use all of them. So this is a layering effect. So we talked about permit streamlining. The downtown plan did 2 things. It provided CEQA streamlining. Once you update a specific plan like that, it comes with an environmental impact report, lots of community engagement. So it really sort of breaks the barriers and increases predictability for both residents and the applicants. So that was one of our bigger moves. And then again, looking at fees and incentives, one of the things that we talk a lot about is time cost certainty for developers. And so the time obviously was in reduced review authority. That also had a cost factor. But looking at fees and incentives furthers that path. We've also looked at our own city assets and how we can contribute as a not just in permitting, a regulatory agency, but how do we actually partner and support downtown housing? So much that we've invested and support the Renewal Enterprise District and invested $10 million of PG&E settlement funds into the Red Housing Fund to support downtown housing, and that was coupled with the county's contribution as well. Next slide. So in 2018, this is what we were looking at for total impact fees per housing unit. So it was almost 30,000 a unit, and it didn't distinguish between downtown housing or on the outskirts, but within the city limits. And it didn't distinguish between affordable housing, and it certainly didn't distinguish between affordable housing in our downtown, and it didn't distinguish about how high or intensive your projects were. So these are things that we were looking into, and in particular, there's certain fees here that you can work with more freely than others. So, for example, a school district fee we don't even control. Housing allocation fee, we're balancing an interest of inclusionary housing and a fee at the time. Water and wastewater, really can't subsidize that based on the structure of that fee. So we had to look, we knew we were going to have to look at alternatives to looking at that, where the flexibility could be. And then we really zeroed in on capital facilities fee and the park impact fee, which the city controls and which we saw had the greatest flexibility for an incentive. So next slide. So in September 2018, what was proposed are 3 resolutions, and so technically I think they're numbered in a different order. I ordered these in the way that we're going to present them. So we'll talk about capital facilities fees, incentives first, then water and wastewater impact fees. And this is just a high level, just giving you a status update about what these are and where they're at, how they were intended. And then we'll conclude with the park impact fees, and Jen will take that piece of the presentation on. Next slide. So there are eligibility criteria, if you will. The 3 resolutions are structured quite similarly in terms of criteria. There are nuances that are associated with the park impact fee that Jen will get into, but here's the key criteria for that form the base of the package. You have to be in downtown and not just qualitatively in downtown. There was a specific boundary set, and I'll show you the map. It's as defined and as expanded with the downtown station plan update. These were referencing our pre-downtown plan zoning districts. These have since been translated to conform to the downtown plan. But essentially, looking at the hierarchy of intensity that we expect in our downtown and desire, we've structured the eligibility to really push towards that. So you have to actually be implementing the city's vision to be eligible for these incentives, not just building housing downtown, but building it to the level that we want and the inclusivity that we want in our downtown housing. So in some sections, it's 4, you have to be building at least 4 or more stories, and then 3 of them have to be residential. Now you can build up to 10, but these are minimum. In other areas, it's 3 or more stories and 2 must be residential. And then also we were interested in moving projects along, right? So the whole push in the last few years has been in refreshing and recreating our city's downtown market. We don't have a lot of mid-rise downtown housing, so the market is immature, if you will. And so really trying to catalyze that new market for Santa Rosa. And so we want to activate these visions, not just have what I like to call paper projects. We want to actually have sticks and bricks being activated downtown. So we have this breaking ground eligibility. Now, this was written in 2018. We didn't know that we were going to experience even an additional fire, the glass fire, and series of evacuations and whatnot, and COVID. And so there's been a lot of natural disasters that have impacted our ability to move along in our downtown toolbox. But as it was written in 2018, the breaking ground eligibility deadline, if you will, was August 31st, 2023. So that's next year. So we know that we're going to have to revisit this package and see, is it written still for the times? Next slide. This is just a map of the downtown. You're all familiar with it. But this shows that our downtown boundaries, as expanded by the downtown plan, include walkability around our smart station and our transit mall. Next slide. Okay, so here's the premise of where we were at with the package of incentives. And I'm no mathematician, so don't test me, but I try to highlight sort of the key principles in this. So before the incentives, like I said, I talked about the park impact fees and the CFF, capital facilities fee, as sort of our targets for potentially reducing fees under certain circumstances and under the eligibility. So that's what I'm going to speak to at this slide. And so what you can see is after the incentives, if you were building market rate, if you just built the minimum, you don't get a discount. There's no incentive. You can build your project and we'll support. But if you really want the financial fiscal incentive, you have to build higher stories, even if it's just market rate. And you can see what the benefit is, and this is per unit. And I think it's the combined. If you build inclusionary affordable units, which is another goal of the city, then you get a much bigger benefit or financial benefit by doing that. And again, if you build up and you build affordable inclusionary, you just start layering on the incentives. So that's the premise of the structure. Next slide. With water and sewer impact fees, different structure altogether. And what we were looking at is the time and cost, because sometimes time is money, and the ability to defer or have payment plans is sometimes just that extra flexible arm that they need to move a project forward, especially as we've seen volatile markets for labor and materials and timing, and everything is sort of in flux. So this has actually been quite popular as well. So there's two options. Again, there's that eligibility clause, but the two options is you can defer your payment of fees until the units are occupied, or 6 months after final inspection, or two, you can have a 5-year plan with interest. So there's a estimate cost benefit for that. Next slide. So now we're going to move into Jen's part of the presentation. We're going to focus on what the park fee incentive was intended to do and our experience with that.
Thanks, Claire. Really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Santos, Deputy Director for Parks. And like Claire mentioned, this is more of a high-level review over where we're at, status report with this. And so just focusing in on the criteria for the park fee in particular, Claire mentioned already the basic criteria that are already set for the levels. And with the park development impact fees, there is, still the qualification for in certain building zones, you can get an exemption of all park development impact fees. So there's no requirement to pay any park development impact fees in certain zones for anything above a 3rd floor. And then in other residential zones, there's a complete exemption above anything over 3 floors or more. So we've got that extra layer there. The other thing is that only 25% of the gross floor area is considered habitable. Whereas in other, if we look at it differently, we'd want to have each door, essentially each portion of that, 100% to be considered residential in order to qualify for each time there's a new door. And so this limits that. The other thing is there is an extra layer for criteria that if a developer is applying for private open space credit, they also cannot combine this incentive with that credit, because that would be, those two would conflict with each other. Next slide. And so as a status update, one of the things that was projected with the resolution that went to council was a reduction in park development impact fees collected, in addition to an exemption for anything over certain stories. There's a significant reduction to about $2 a square foot. This is generally not how we calculate fees for residential units downtown. It's a set fee for a unit, for a residential unit. But when you take averages, it is a significant reduction. Essentially you could look at a regular residential unit as anywhere from $4 to $16 a square foot, depending on the square footage. So it's a nice reduction and a good incentive. The other thing, as Claire mentioned, that the projects do need to be within the downtown area for using this incentive. And that was that map that Claire showed earlier. Another layer to this for the park development impact fees is the fees that the city does collect are kept within the zones that they're collected in downtown. Park development impact fees are collected per quadrant, which the quadrants are made by the intersections of Highway 101 and Highway 12. They create the kind of 4 intersections, so there's 4 quadrants. And so fees are still collected in those quadrants, and there are 3 quadrants that overlap that map. So as those fees are collected, they will stay within that downtown area of the fees that are collected. And we are working on the method for collecting those fees. And as of yet, we have not collected any fees. So not a huge update there, but we wanted to at least share that with you. We do have 2 projects pending, and they're going to equal about $900,000 that we anticipate to qualify for this project. And then there's an additional 4 or 5 projects that may or may not qualify coming up, that they've applied for building permits, and we'll see where they're at. So that's where we're at right now. We've got a couple pending, and we're hopeful to get about 4 or 5 more of these projects. And next slide, I'll turn it back over to Claire for our next slide. Conclusion.
This is our last slide, and
Oh, is it okay?
council
Sorry.
member, I see your hand up. If we can just run through this last slide, and then we can go through questions on the.
Absolutely. I have no problem with that. Thank you.
So this last slide is just like, where are we at? What are our next steps? So staff's quite aware that there is not an expiration date, but there's an eligibility date that will essentially be like a sunset date, and that's that breaking ground by August of 2023. So we have added this review of these resolutions in our work plan. We'll eventually be seeking direction what you want to do with what the council would like to do with these resolutions. Otherwise, they have their life, and it's an eligibility sunset is what it is. And we'll continue to monitor the use of them. We'll continue to collect feedback from staff, from applicants, from the public. And then we'll continue to report back to the downtown subcommittee. And that is the conclusion of our presentation.
All right, go ahead, John.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Jen. Could you go back to, I think it might be slide number 10. They weren't all numbered.
Was it the one with the market rate versus affordable, or?
Yes. And so you lost me on the on how this is formulated. The $2 per square foot. I mean, explain to me, if you could, how the park fee incentive options are determined, or how do the developers take advantage of this particular element?
Sure. So I'll take a stab at revising how I'm describing it.
That's okay.
We also have Jesse. One of the things that's interesting is that while the parks, our section does look at utilization of these fees going forward, Jesse's team is the one that actually does the collecting. And so we may need to ask him a little bit more, but essentially the way that fees are collected normally per our codes is a per door just cost. So for a single family detached home, for instance, is around $12,000 per unit per door. And that's it. There's a little bit of difference between each zone. So we have the 4 zones where park development impact fees are collected. So the resolution changed the fee status to say that we're going to reduce it to $2 a square foot. And so it's just a different way. I think staff is trying to determine how best to implement that. But essentially, you're going to divide the square footage of each unit coming in by that $2, rather than just having the basic standard fee that's paid per unit. And I don't know if Jesse, if that helps.
No, it actually does, and
Okay.
it was just I just got kind of a little bit confused in the
Yeah.
formula.
Yes.
And now and you've explained it to me now, and
Okay.
I was wondering if is there a way, let's say, in the future, there, our parks are in good shape downtown, and there's nothing that is just, biting at the bit to be changed or rectified in some way where there's damage or something, and another park within our city limits is in need of some quick funding. Is there a way to put into the land, and believe me, I am pro downtown, pro city centered growth. I mean, there's no one that's more dedicated to this concept than I am, as far as I know. I mean, I know there are the entire council is looking for the city centered growth concept and to improve the experience in our downtown. However, there could be times when certain parks need some kind of funding that could be collected potentially from the downtown bucket, if you will. Is there a way to include in the language with potentially a supermajority of the council to allow funding that is sitting and waiting in the downtown? Because my assumption is, my hope is that there's a lot of development in the downtown, and that downtown parks fee will grow quickly, but then not necessarily identified as a primary use at that time. Is there a way to allow the council to say, we have this money sitting in the downtown bucket, but if this particular park is in need of some funding, is there a way to create some language that would allow the council to use some of the funding that's dedicated to the downtown in a different zone?
So, certainly an amendment going forward, I think, could resolve that. I would, definitely want to check with our legal counsel. But right now it is restricted. So the pie is sliced thin for the downtown area, and it's restricted to the downtown area for those projects that use this incentive in those quadrants. So it does restrict it. It is tight. So right now the fees are collected by something called the Quimby Act, and that collects it in those zones, in those 4 zones. This resolution for the park development impact fees applies only to projects that are qualified for this incentive. So we're trying to earmark those particular projects, and that is the funding that will stay in that downtown area. And so it does become rather complicated, and it's you cannot move it outside of the boundary at this point. Yeah. But a future amendment would allow that to happen, allow the combination of funds to happen. For instance, like we're working on Fremont Park now. Fremont Park is the funds using for that come from that entire quadrant, there would not be enough funds collected in the downtown alone to update that park the way we have intended to update it in the future. And other parks similar. So yes, so there is a way with an amendment, I think, to make that happen.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know, if I was a developer and I was putting money into that bucket for the downtown park development, I would expect it to be spent there. So whether it be a loan or whatever, however it would have to be designated, and it may not even be legally possible, but I was looking for a little flexibility and being able to be nimble a bit. And if there were other parks that were in dire need of some funding, and there were funds sitting available and unused in the downtown bucket, then that's kind of what I was just looking for, a little flexibility, and it may not at all be possible. It was just, it's more of a question and a potential recommendation than is actually likely or possible. So it's just a kind of a curiosity question, and I appreciate the response.
Sure, and we'd be happy to respond with some options there. Because one of the other things to take into consideration is when we receive grant funding, we have to come up with a match for that. And that's another thing that we would like to make sure we have the most optimum amount of cash available, so to speak, to match for future grants. And that additional restriction may pose a problem in future grants. We don't know for sure,
yeah.
But absolutely we'd be happy to return.
Yeah, good point. Thank you very much.
Claire, my question for you is kind of a basic one. And obviously we haven't had as much development downtown as we would like up to this point, but do we still consider this program a success?
Well, and success is defined in different ways. So part of it is how all in is Santa Rosa with downtown housing. So that package, that toolbox speaks to that intent and the sophistication of that intent about looking at it from different angles. I think the presence of being creative and addressing time, cost, certainty in all these different ways has been incredibly successful. That's why people are coming to downtown and starting to really do some significant investment. And Jesse can talk about what's under construction now, but what's going to be under breaking ground between now and next year. In terms of technical success, we're gonna actually have to dive into that. One, we need to figure out how used have these incentives actually been. That's a different test. And then what was the output? What was the contribution that the city provided? So yes, there's pros and cons to any of these levers. To Jen's point, it takes away from our match abilities. To Councilmember Sawyer's point, it earmarks for a certain boundary in the city instead of being more flexible or at least quadrant. And so there's pros and cons, but I think in terms of part of that overall push, that's been very successful. And I think construction-wise, we would have been a lot more successful if we hadn't had the Tubbs fire, the glass fire, and all the evacuations and COVID. So that we couldn't control, but obviously we lost a lot of momentum in the last few years because of that.
Yeah. One of the things that I also hear from folks is a desire for a little bit more flexibility in what we constitute as a park. For instance, I know that some cities, and I've talked to Raisa about this before, some cities have on the side of some of the buildings, horizontal rock climbing for kids and other types of activities that make the space more inviting. Is there a way for us to make this fund flexible so that it's not just being spent on a traditional park, but really looking at amenities in the downtown that are park-like or create that excitement and that activity?
I'll do my best to chime in here. I think that traditionally that's not how the code has been interpreted. To me right now, it's park property proper. But certainly we can look at that and come back with what our options are legally to look at, can we do some things like that? can we extend this funding to more creative ways of providing recreational opportunities, permanence. One of the things about the code is it provides a sense of permanence when we collect these fees, that it's going to be there in perpetuity. So that's something we want to investigate and get back to you all on, because we like any ideas of trying to look at ways of creating permanent recreation. And so, yeah, it's something that right now has to be dedicated as park land. So we'd need to look at what the legalities around that would be and get back to you all.
I'd be really interested in us exploring sort of that broader concept, not just on park proper, but really what the intent and overall desire of a park is, and whether that need is being met through more creative measures in our downtown, where perhaps there isn't as much open space, but still that need as we put in housing. Any other questions, John?
No, thank you, Mayor.
All right, let's go to public comment on the item. I see Steve Bertelbaugh, and we'll have him start.
Thank you, Mayor Rogers and members. Steve Bertelbaugh with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. I'm curious how many projects we're talking about here. How many are in the pipeline? Or is it half a dozen, or more? And do we have a sense of how many of those have been attracted by this particular process? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We'll hold questions until the end, and then we'll ask staff to respond as we need to. Let's go to Adrian.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. This is Adrian Covert, lead for Santa Rosa YIMBY and a downtown resident. I think the incentives resolutions program has been a success if you look at the number of developments that are downtown. Good medium density developments around the certainly the Railroad Square area that are currently under construction and in the pipeline. I would like to see an actual accounting of how many projects and how many units have been using these fees, so we can see if we can make them better. But certainly, I think the city should find a way to extend and improve incentives to develop downtown. I think that more residents downtown is essential for bringing more customers and workers to make into the downtown area without bringing their cars, and is essential for having a vibrant city. Regarding the water and the sewer impact fees, my question is that multifamily households use about half the water demand as single family homes. So I want to know if the current water and sewer impact fees reflect this lighter impact, or are they the same impact following the deferral period? And if they're the same, then there's an opportunity there to have the impact fees for the types of 3-story multifamily, higher density projects for the impact fees to more accurately reflect their actual impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Gregory?
Yeah, thank you. What I'm interested in learning is something that I heard I'm confused because at one point I heard that it doesn't differentiate between affordability, between inclusionary and any kind of, a mix of housing. And on the other hand, one of your slides seemed to indicate that there were incentives, and it did make a sense to try to vary the sizes and the design of the individual units. At the same time I'm looking at this, I read the staff report on 420 Mendocino, which is coming before design review, and I have to believe that the change in the mix design to smaller units to take advantage of FAR was in some way kind of incentivized by this. So I'm interested in anything Jesse or anybody else can bring to the conversation about what has happened. Earlier, I heard a $900,000 fee expectation or hope. And with the sizes of the units that are being proposed, I also heard there were 2 in the pipeline. that has to be about, 450,000 square feet that you guys are expecting that these units are going to produce. 420 Mendocino is about 160. So, I mean, I think there's actually some real projects that can be used as illustrations, but it's really hard for me to figure out what, Adrian and Steve are asking, which is to what degree did it stimulate any of this? Because we won't really know that for a while. And that's really crucial to whether or not you ought to continue this. If all we're going to get, from my point of view, is a whole lot of market rate housing, I'm going to be less excited about it. We've said all along in the stationary plan and lots of others that we want to mix, and this is part of the formula. So let's get some data on what it is this is actually producing. Thank you.
Thanks, Gregory. Let's go to Hugh, and then we'll come back to Cadence.
Mr. Critchell?
Yes. Do you hear me now?
We can.
Great, thank you. Sorry, technological illiteracy on my part. Speaking on behalf of the DAO, which of course manages the Downtown Benefit District, several observations. One, just for clarity, that $2 per square foot fee applies only to affordable projects. Non-affordable projects pay a different fee structure under the incentive program. That may be clear, but I wanted to point that out. Secondly, I want to clarify Jen's comments about the Quimby Act. The Quimby Act is explicit that fees may be spent on, quote, parks or recreational facilities, unquote, and many jurisdictions have interpreted that as broadly as you're suggesting, Mayor Rogers. There's no legal issue really about that. I also want to point out that the incentive program is needed more now than ever. The combination of exploding construction costs, higher interest rates have made entitled projects all the more difficult to get off the ground, and has compromised the pro formas for projects that are now under consideration. It's really important to maintain this toolbox in its entirety. I can't stress that too much, speaking as a developer who is both working on projects and has projects under construction. In terms of the park fees, I also need to point out something that hasn't appeared yet in discussion, which is that the provisions in the ordinance in respect to park fees have been now incorporated in the downtown stationary plan, and they appear to be permanent. They appear not to be subject to sunsetting, and that should be borne in mind. And in addressing your comments, Council Member Sawyer, you could and should perhaps make this permanent, so you codify it, but obviously it can be revisited. You could create a provision to revisit it periodically. And if there was a very significant number of units built beyond the 100 that we have currently under construction, or the roughly 100 that Pullman Lofts has under construction, then you can obviously revisit the policy, which is a policy which is plainly extremely critical. Finally, in terms of defining how park dollars are spent downtown, Jeju Way, Comstock Mall, the potential climbing walls on buildings, planting, benches, trees, improved lighting, all those things to make the downtown core a genuine recreation. And the source for that in part is park fees, in part would be the EIFD, which you support, and is critical. So I would encourage staying focused on the toolbox, making permanent whatever you can make permanent, codifying what needs to be codified to eliminate inconsistencies, and move forward aggressively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Let's go to Cadence.
Good morning, Mayor Rogers, Councilmember Sawyer. Cadence Hinkle-Allenson, also with the Downtown Action Organization and Downtown District. I wanted to just start by saying how much we appreciate the time and work of city staff in both putting these incentives together initially and bringing this into the discussion today. As Hugh mentioned, the DAO is really committed to working with and supporting the city and kind of bringing our shared vision of downtown to fruition. I'm just going to reiterate the importance of keeping the park fees in the downtown area. It is really critical for the shared economic vitality of the area and the city center growth that Santa Rosa needs.
as we're aiming to increase housing downtown and limit the need for vehicles, making the city more walkable and bikeable, we need to continue investing and renovating the green spaces, parks, and recreational spaces within the area. There is an incredible amount of unmet potential in the downtown, both in the existing parks and for other recreational spaces. And we really need the city to keep the PDI fees in the downtown area in order to realize that potential. As everyone has said, we have not been able to make as much progress as we'd like over the past few years, given the fires and the pandemic, but we are poised to make that progress with a number of developments moving forward and others on the horizon. And these incentives are critical for reaching our housing goals and continuing to attract new development into the downtown area. So again, appreciate all the time and effort that's going into reviewing this and the city's forward-thinking policies about downtown growth and development. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all as these opportunities come up.
All right, thank you so much, Cadence. Any other hands?
We have no additional hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'll go ahead and bring it back. Claire, I'm hoping you can jump in on some of the questions that we heard from folks in the public. Namely, there were some questions around developments that are moving forward. How much do we know that this mattered for them? And then the distinction between affordable and market rate.
Yeah, no, these were great questions that came up in public comment. I appreciate them. For what's in the pipeline, I'm going to lean on Jesse for that. I guess what I would say is in terms of collecting the feedback, couple things. One, like documenting our progress. What is the momentum? Spoiler alert, but we are preparing a council briefing on what we're calling the downtown dashboard. And that's going to be presented on August 23rd. And so you'll get a peek. We're hoping to launch a dashboard that's similar to our rebuild tracker, where you can actually see and monitor what's going on downtown for downtown housing. So that is forthcoming. So we'll all have the same information that you can self-research. And then we're also embarking on what we're calling the Developer Roundtable series right now. And part of this is part of our just looking at our downtown asset strategy, but really checking in with developers right now about what's working, what incentives are working, what do they find useful, and checking in with this toolbox and seeing what they like about it, what they would want changed, and whatnot. And then also in terms of further engagement, so this is on our council work plan, which means staff will be assigned to review this, monitor, report back out to the public, and the council will have the opportunity to weigh in on what they would like to do with it, whether it's an amendment or let it, I guess, de facto sunset. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jesse to talk about what's in the pipeline. And then I think Jen probably might have some follow-ups on some of the comments about recreation. I'll leave it to that.
Thank you, Claire. So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Sawyer, Mr. Futrell pointed out a couple of projects that are currently under construction. Mr. Futrell's project at 888 4th Street. That's one project that will be paying specifically into this downtown area for park fees. And then 701 Wilson Street, known as Pullman Lofts. That project is one of those qualifying projects also in this park fee or incentive area. Those two projects combined, as I said, are under construction, and they have fees that are deferred until final inspection or occupancy. So park fees alone are just about $920,000 combined for those two projects that will be paid into the system when they reach that point in construction. We have another project that is much more viable, so to speak. It has been recently applied for building permits. That's the Railroad Square project that we know of, the old cannery site. I don't have the fee amounts for that one, but that one is one of the currently most viable that we see that is moving forward. And then there are 3 to 4 other projects that are entitled or re-entitling or getting close. Mr. Futrell talked about 420 Mendocino. that will has been through the process once before, but it will be a qualifying project. And I recall last numbers on that project were approximately 120 units, I believe. So that would be fairly close to Mr. Futrell's project as far as what the dollar amounts would come in, which is 888 4th Street is $475,000. So that's where the split is. The other three projects aren't in for building permit application, and that's where we do apply the fees to. So we don't have dollar figures on those. And I do have some information as well on the question about the water and sewer demand fees. If you would like me to expand what I know about that, that's not my department, but I work with those fees as well.
Sure.
So the question was, is there a concession being made or is consideration being made for smaller apartment square footage type units? And I went and looked at the water division fee schedule, and they do have a category that is new. And I recall it going through the process. Santa Rosa Water went through a process to really evaluate small units. And it was a combination of small, high density type apartment units that really married up with the same way they looked at ADUs. And the magic number on those is 750 square feet or less. So they have a lower fee for a specific category in apartment units, 750 square feet or less. Same number applies to ADUs, 750 square feet or less. No demand fees for those ADUs, and a fairly significantly reduced fee for apartment units below 750.
You know, I just want to provide a little bit of background too, just to go answer some of the questions that were provided. I mean, at the time, our goal was housing for all. And there was a recognition through the Council of Infill Builders that, you know, it might, we couldn't say no to market rate housing, but we were trying to incentivize or provide additional incentives for inclusionary, affordable and affordable housing in the downtown. So I just want to point out that, again, we looked at these policies, to Hugh Futrell's point, as part of a stack of incentives. So isolating it from one or another for specific purposes, or trying to make it so that it's only for affordable is a little bit different from what the initial intention of our efforts with the Housing Action Plan and the Council of Infill Development report that we responded to. So I just want to give the historic perspective as well on that.
Thanks. And I'll just add, one of the questions or one of the comments was about the $2 per square foot. If I missed that step, yes, it's for the affordable. So that's an extra incentive for adding affordability to a project that's coming downtown. Or, you know, it's a significant reduction in park fees for anybody wanting to have inclusionary / affordable housing downtown. And then with the comments about using park development impact fees for other recreational purposes besides parks, we would, you know, definitely like the ability to further dive into that topic, maybe not right this minute, but coming back either to this subcommittee or to full council to look at that. And, you know, ask the question, are the park development impact fees the right fees to be used for things like that maybe are less permanent? There's, you know, we have some concerns, and we want to bring up all of the aspects around that. There's also other projects that we had to stop doing so that we could focus on the downtown with the park development impact fees we were collecting in order to meet that. So we want to have a really well-rounded discussion. So there's a lot of information available to this board and to the council when we're looking at this ordinance, either sunsetting or moving forward as a, you know, with an amendment or something like that, or as is. So we want to make sure that all the information is there and you'll have the everything you need to make that decision about use of park development impact fees.
Great, thanks, Jen. John, do you want to, any other questions, or do you want to give your direction?
No, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate staff's response, and I have no further questions.
Okay. From my perspective, I'd love to see us keep this train rolling. And so let's bring it to council as and Claire, you said it's already on the work plan for this year. let's bring it to council for discussion of extension, whatever that means, whether it's a permanent move or if it's a timeline to be defined. I also do want to have the conversation about what the fees can go towards. Part of this is a recognition that what we define as a park in our downtown core might be different than what we define as a park in other parts of our city. And so I want to make sure that we're being as generous and flexible with the definition to be able to meet the needs of the people that'll live there. And so let's have that discussion.
I appreciate that, Mayor, and I agree with you. I'd like to continue the conversation. I just want to make sure that what we told our developers about how these funds would be used is that obligation is satisfied. But at the same time, I'm also looking for the potential for flexibility where possible. But if we say they're going to be used in a certain way, we have an obligation to make sure that they are used in that way, unless there's a dire need elsewhere where we can justify it and replace those funds in subsequent to the use in a different environment, so, or a different site. So I'm not looking to eliminate our obligation as stated in the original intention of the council in 2018. I'm just looking for, where possible, the possibility of some flexibility where legally possible and without disrupting our obligation to those developers that have paid into that fund with knowing that they were to be used in a certain way.
Okay. Raisa?
Yeah, I just want to say, Amy Nicholson has to jump off for another meeting, and I believe Claire does as well. So the next sign permit item, Amy, do you want us to postpone, or do you want me and Cadence to go over your notes for the sign item?
I think I can provide a quick update, and the housing ad hoc meeting can start with a different item that I'm not involved in.
Okay, Mayor, do you mind if we jump to this real quickly?
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay. Okay, you're good to go, Amy.
Okay. So I'll just go through a few of my notes. And good morning, Mayor and Councilmember Sawyer. My name is Amy Nicholson, and I'm the supervising planner for our current development team. And so we had a meeting with Cadence from the Metro Chamber and Signorama representatives, we being Claire and myself, just last month to discuss some challenges with our sign permitting process. And the purpose of this meeting was to understand some challenges that were raised with our sign permitting process. And so we certainly recognize the importance of these challenges and our need to address them, since signs are universal to all of our businesses here in Santa Rosa. And through this process, we identified a number of issues. First and foremost, we heard just generally that sign permitting was becoming a more lengthy and expensive process. Some of the specific issues raised were that the application requirements were unclear or confusing, and this pertained to both planning sign applications and also our building permit requirements for signs. And then there were also some issues with the applicability of sign programs. So sign programs are typically only required for buildings which have multiple tenants, and they are really specific to square footages and design. We redid the city sign ordinance, I think, back in 2014. And at that time, it was intended to sort of simplify the requirements for when sign permits are required. And it sounds like this has been a point of confusion as people have been attempting to obtain signs for businesses, even in cases where a sign program may no longer be applicable. And then we also heard that there was just an increase in the amount of time to obtain a sign permit. So we sort of understood this as being a change that came into place during COVID because we moved into virtual permitting. And there were fewer people coming into the front counter to have their signs reviewed and issued over the counter. And so there's more back and forth that's been happening through email exchanges. So we've identified a number of follow-up items required to resolve these concerns and recognize some of these are shorter term items and some are longer term. We have had a follow-up meeting with our intake staff and also Jesse Oswald to just understand what changes have occurred in our sign permitting process for planning specifically since we moved to a virtual counter. And then our planning team has reviewed our sign permit application to understand how we can simplify it and clarify any requirements. And we'll be updating this application within the next month. And then I wanted to add too that we're very fortunate. We just finished onboarding 4 new planners on our current development team. And so they'll be able to help us with reviewing sign permits. We have a training that's scheduled, so this will help to improve consistency and certainly help to alleviate some of the concerns that we heard during that meeting. So again, those are some of the short-term solutions that we've identified. There are some longer-term solutions where we'll need to coordinate more with various other staff within the department. But Claire and I will continue to work toward these solutions as we can, and we'll continue to seek feedback from anyone who would like to provide it and can have a follow-up meeting as necessary, and certainly provide updates to this subcommittee as well. And Cadence, I know that you're here too, and I'd love for you to add in anything that I may have missed.
I don't think I have anything additional. I just want to say how productive the meeting was. This is an issue that's definitely come up to me over the last 3 years pretty regularly. So I appreciate the acknowledgement and the expediency that you and Claire are kind of moving this forward to address some of the challenges. I think it'll really help both our existing businesses as they look to make facade improvements and help to highlight how the city is simplifying policies and permits for new businesses coming in. It's really great when we can talk about the kind of business forward approach the city is taking.
John, any questions?
No questions, just a comment. I mean, this conversation, I think, because it does deal with aesthetics, has been going on for decades, and I don't envy you your task in trying to come up with a program that satisfies all the various nuances that have to do with signage, and not only city signage and directional signage, but signage on buildings. It's a very difficult task, and it has been going on for a very long time. I don't think it will ever be really completely satisfied, because aesthetics change and people's desires change. We all know when we enter into a city and are faced with a lack of sign ordinance. And the first thing that I experience when I see that is, who the heck let them do that? And that's what I don't want to have in our signage in our city, is, because they have forgotten the concept of subtlety and effectiveness. And that's the challenge. And I don't envy you the task, but I honor the effort, because we definitely need to have a model of what is and is not acceptable, as difficult as that is to develop. And I appreciate the effort.
Let's go to public comment on this then, John. If you have a comment, go ahead, hit the raise hand feature.
We have no hands raised at this time.
All right. I just wanted to say thank you as well, Amy. I hear about this all the time from folks, particularly downtown. I agree with John. It's no easy task. It seems like it's something that should be simple. And I hope that we can continue to move things forward and streamline it, since it is a cost and it's a time suck for a lot of our businesses trying to get even something simple done. So thank you for that. And thank you to Claire for pushing it forward.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Let's go to item 3.3.
Yeah, just to point out, it seems like anything we do here is not simple. It's like, it seems like it should be and never is. All right, so Cadence and I are I actually want to do a time check too, because this isn't an urgent item. Are you guys good to go until 10?
Yeah, I have another hour until my next thing, John.
Okay.
I have no restrictions at this point.
Okay.
Retired life.
Alrighty, well, so this report on downtown business recruitment development, program development is actually, it's a collaborative effort between the city chamber and the Downtown Action Organization. It is part of something that we call out on our economic development strategic plan as well. And at least for this first initiative, the city's sponsoring it through funds, but for ease and flexibility, we're running it through the chamber program, and Cadence is leading it. So I'm going to hand it over to her. But just as an overview of what we're looking to do is this is really a marketing program, mostly web-based, but we want to make sure that the points of entry are seamless, regardless of where they're coming into the city or inquiring about being in the downtown. So we're looking to develop something that will be, again, online, that you can get to from the Downtown Action Organization website, the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber website, or the city website. And the interface for permitting and such, again, will be should be seamless. The other thing that we're looking to do, and again, Cadence will go into the details, but this is an iterative program to do better and get better, especially as the market changes and the needs change. So it's another way to not just address the current things, but to look for potential policy initiatives that we can follow up on as we identify, or as our market changes and we identify new things that are needed to encourage businesses to come downtown. With that, I am going to hand it over to Cadence to give an overview of what we're doing at this point.
Thanks, Raisa. As Raisa said, this is a collaborative effort, and we're really excited to be able to be helping to move this forward from the chamber and the DAO. We're going to be aiming to create a marketing piece and a website, as Raisa said, that will be able to live with the city, the chamber, and the downtown, that just highlights and promotes downtown Santa Rosa as a feasible location for successful new business and development. I think having something very professional and holistic that pulls together all the benefits, the incentives, the relevant data and information is going to be really key, both to share with brokers, share with potential developers, and provide the information for anyone looking at the area for potential investment opportunities. So our goal is to complete this in about 6 months. So we're looking at about March 2023. And as Raisa said, to have materials that can be regularly updated as information changes, as conditions change, as the market changes, so that it really reflects the current situation downtown and what people looking to invest in the area are needing to know. So the goal is to include a bit of a picture of what's been happening downtown over the past couple of years. A little odd considering most people think about the pandemic time as pretty stagnant or regressive, but we really didn't lose very many businesses, and we've had quite a few new ones come in. So it'll be important for us to highlight that, highlight the new businesses that have come in, highlight the current developments and where they are in their process, as well as any upcoming developments that are kind of moving through. So we're going to have a map that kind of calls out all those pieces to give a nice visual for what and where the development is happening in the downtown area. We're going to try to pull some quotes and some feedback from businesses in the downtown, help people understand kind of the market that exists here, the opportunity that current business owners have been able to take advantage of. We're going to include relevant information about the community as a whole, talk about Santa Rosa, the demographics, as well as, some of the fun awards or accolades the city has gotten throughout the last few years. And then we're also going to work specifically on data and demographic details that would be very relevant to new businesses. So we're going to focus on some new methods for data collection to kind of explain and illustrate the opportunity, really create a really clear picture of what it would be like, who your customers are, what type of activity happens downtown, what people who come downtown are looking for, all of those things that we know that new businesses and developers need to understand before making that investment. And then we're also going to highlight the services and amenities that are available to business owners. So that will include, the DAO's street level services. It will include any information about parking, as far as the ease of parking downtown, the number of garages and spaces available for both employees and for customers. And then also highlight the business-friendly policies that the city has put together. So that includes the sign permit and ordinances that Amy was just talking about. So we're really glad to be able to move that forward. And then it also takes into account some of the other items that the DAO has been focusing on this year. So we've mentioned them for the last couple months, but it really ties into kind of that memo. And we know some of these ideas are more realistic than others. Some will move more quickly than others. And it'll be a lot easier to implement some than others. But we want to be able to talk about TI permits, which we know is really big for new businesses coming in. How long is it really going to take me to get up and running? We've had a lot of complaints or kind of shock and disbelief about how long it can take for the permits to get processed. And those delays can be really, really harmful to new businesses getting started. If they're anticipating having revenue come in 1 month and it's 4 or 5 months later that they're able to start, they're just kind of spinning their wheels trying to get back to where they need to be, and it makes it harder for them to be successful. We also want to talk about better parking permit options for employees downtown. This one is a little more specific to office employees because we know as you're bringing a workforce downtown during the day, parking is expensive. So coming up with ways that will help incentivize office leasing downtown and make it easier for businesses who need bulk parking for their employees to come here rather than out to Stony Point for a new office space. We know that the office landscape is shifting, so anything we can do to really promote downtown as a safe, easy and affordable option for the places that are looking for offices will be really critical. And then the last item on the list of things that we're hoping to be able to talk about, and this one might be a little bit complicated, is a 5-year suspension of business license fees for new employers in the downtown, which is kind of a minimal financial impact. And it's really more about the perception of Santa Rosa being really business friendly. So these are some of the items that we'd love to be able to highlight in this package, just as kind of quick bullet points, things that really are make it easy to move your business here or start a new business here. And we have a lot of resources available to share with potential new businesses coming in, both through the chamber and the city. So I think, Raisa, that's kind of my summary of what we're aiming to accomplish through this project. But we wanted to see if there were any other policy initiatives or ideas that would that either Mayor Rogers or Councilmember Sawyer wanted to share as things that we could include in this program as we kind of create it over the next few months.
John?
Oh, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Cadence. You know, anything that we can do that expedites and eases the ability of business owners to take the risk to come. It's always a risk, wherever they decide to locate. Montgomery Village is starting to look like a ghost town. So even in Montgomery Village, it's a risk. So anytime that we can reduce or mitigate some of those risks of bringing businesses to our downtown is something that I support. I think and one has to look at the long term. You know, admittedly, we may not get some fees in the beginning, but the sales taxes and just the vibrancy of a downtown being lively and where you don't see a lot of closed businesses is a long-term, short-term and long-term plus. So I'm more than pleased to hear you articulate some of the challenges and recommendations as well. So having been a long-term downtown business person personally for 35 years, and my family business started in 1945. So I know the challenges and what can happen when the city gets involved and decides to make some changes to its fees, with the ultimate result of being a popular place for people to visit. So I appreciate the report and look forward to positive change.
Yeah, and our team knows that I like the dashboards. I like the access to information for folks. I am picturing, and Cadence, you and I have had this conversation before. I had somebody come to me and they wanted to look for office space to move their headquarters. And they came to the mayor because they were trying to figure out what spaces were available. And if we had a dashboard I could point them to and say, go to this and see all of your different options, what people are putting out there, how much square footage they have, what the expected rent might be. It'd be a lot easier for us to attract some of those businesses and just make it so convenient and easy for them that it's the path of least resistance for them to come here. So I think it's a wonderful project. I really like the idea. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment, see if others would like to make comments.
We do have one public comment, Gregory Farron. Hold on just one moment. And Mr. Farron, you have the ability to speak. If you would like to proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cadence, for that report. And I wanted to add at some point in the future, I'd like to see a report or at least some conversation about another huge metro program. The largest single ARPA grant the county gave was to the Metro Chamber of Commerce for what I will call a kind of equity incentives for BIPOC community businesses. I don't want to see all those businesses end up in Roseland. I'd love to be able to have a real incentive to have small businesses like they're supporting end up downtown. And I'd love to be able to have some consciousness of what it will take to do that. $6 million is going to be spent on incentivizing and supporting those small businesses by the chamber. And I'd love to be able to have you guys and the community join together, whether it's business license fee waivers or anything else. The city really needs to invest jointly with the county in this effort, and I'd love to hear it in the future. Thanks a lot.
Let's go to Pauline.
Hi, thanks so much. I had our the marketing and development team for Cornerstone, and I also serve as the vice chair on the DAO, so I'm familiar with this project. But I just wanted to reiterate the need for this. This is a tool that we at Cornerstone have been looking to create, but it's something we really can't create on our own to see this more holistic view. And it's something that's really helpful, not only for the business to business, like you're talking about, and for brokers, but for the development community. We have the development website, obviously, on the City of Santa Rosa's site. However, it's not really a front-facing tool. So I just want to reiterate the importance of this for developers to not only attract really interesting, ground floor tenants, but also to help with, financing and showing banks and other community groups the impacts that downtown is looking to see in the next, let's say 3 to 10 years. So thanks so much for supporting this.
Thank you, Pauline. I don't see any other hands. Let's go bring it back then. Any final comments, John?
No, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Cadence.
Yeah, thank you both. All right, let's move on to item 4.1 then, while we have Cadence.
Yeah, so actually we've moved to written updates so that we can streamline and focus more time on the things that we just did. So I'm actually going to just do a very quick summary of what is attached as written updates to the agenda. And we do have representatives from each of these groups. So if you have any questions, we can pull them up, but this is the first time we're doing this. So from the Downtown Action Organization, I do want to highlight that in their reports, they do, both theirs and the Railroad Square Association, they do call out new businesses. Both Downtown Action Organization and Railroad Square Association highlight some of the common issues that they're seeing. So we have noted these. We will continue to work, and I know they continue to work directly with city staff on challenges such as homelessness still, of course, as well as the permitting issues. So those were highlighted. Something that I noted, which was interesting on the Railroad Square Association report, is the scooter program, that there are some complaints about scooters being left. So that's a possible future agenda item to get an update on the how the scooter program is rolling out, how effective it is, if there are any issues we need to address or that could be easily mitigated. The other report that's attached is the parking program. So just a quick highlight on that one. The parking program has returned to pre-COVID operations. And I know you'll be getting this, the Walker study was done on the state of our parking in the downtown area. That's coming to council soon. But there is a high level overview of the Walker study on the report. We are still overparked. We still have a lot of capacity for parking in our downtown. And then the last thing, especially event permits, we actually put this into 2 categories, or we actually, Tara Thompson did. So just to be clear, there's a special event application that we get from the public for things within the public right away. But then there's also the additional list of special events that the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber is doing under their blanket permit, and that covers everything within the square in the downtown area. So hopefully you had a chance to read those or at least scan them. And if you have any questions for any of those areas, we can unmute the correct people. And then the other thing I want to say is if there are any other written updates you would like, or if you want to go back to oral updates, we can do that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Raisa. John, any comments on the reports?
Just a quick question. I may have completely missed this, and I apologize. Is there a current update on our parklet design program and how things are going in that arena? I know it's probably a challenge for some of our retailers and some of our restaurants, but I'm curious if I missed the report, and secondly, where we might stand and what do you see as the future?
We don't have it agendized, but if Cadence stays on, we can touch upon it under department reports. I was going to call out and say that is moving forward. So Cadence, don't leave yet, we can do that under department report.
Okay, let's see if there's any hands on our written reports.
We have no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back. I did want to just highlight, I'm in Railroad Square at least a couple of times a week, and I did want to call out the Railroad Square Association. It's looking clean, it's looking friendly. I've noticed a real uptick in the last couple of weeks in particular of people being there and the friendly atmosphere. So I did want to call that out in particular because even my wife noticed and pointed it out to me. I thought that was nice.
Okay, so we'll go on to department reports. And so, yeah, I did want to point out that we are moving forward and the Parklet program is moving forward. We do have a couple of applications. Cadence, you work more closely with some of those who are doing the applications. I think Osceola is one. Do you want to touch on how it's going? Because I know that you and Gabe work more closely than I do on this.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, we have downtown, we've got one, I think the furthest along is Osceola's. They've put together kind of a very nice plan that's going to match the facade of their building to expand into, I think, 2 parking spaces out front. They might not actually be even taking up 2 because they're going to be kind of shifting a yellow zone. And then I know from talking to Gabe that both Brew and Toad in the Hole are also kind of in the early stages of moving forward. I'm regularly sending information out to all of our current parklet holders. And Gabe and his team just sent a big update out to everyone who has a parklet and I'm blanking on the phrase, but seating attached to the side of the building, patio seating. So we have, I believe Russian River is moving forward, last I heard, with expanding their patio seating, but they won't be having a parklet. And then I love our downtown restaurant owners, but they're not the quickest to respond to things. So they've got so much else on their plate. So they know they have until September 12th to get their current parklets taken down. And I imagine this month we'll get a lot of action from those who are ready to move forward with starting the process, figuring out the design, and kind of getting their permanent parklet in place. There is a little bit of flexibility. So if any of the businesses are moving forward in the process, but are not far enough along for their permanent parklet to be in place by September 12th, they will be able to keep it up as long as they're kind of good faith moving forward with the permanent part of the installation. So I mean, by next meeting, we should have a pretty clear picture of who specifically is going to have a parklet. And we might have some updates too on whether anyone else is going to be able to do, can add the patio seating. So it's great to be able to share that there's a facade improvement program that the city is bringing forward. I mean, I'll just say again, it was so great how the city brought all the fees down to as low as possible. $500 for a permit, and then $130 something for every subsequent year makes a big difference, especially when they do have to take on construction costs. And now that the city's even offering to help support that, is just it's really appreciated. And if you don't hear it from our restaurant owners, I hear it from them. So I'll pass that along to you, how much they see and feel that the city is wanting to kind of help and support their success. But I'll try to provide an update in my next report about who's officially moving forward or who's gotten the permit going.
And we'll ask for that from Chris and Railroad Square as well.
Thank you, Cadence, and through the mayor. I think I can speak for the entire council, and they're sensitive to the costs involved and their dedication to creating a consistent and just a welcoming environment with the parklets. It's not easy, it's not cheap, and we appreciate their effort. The restaurants were hit hard, as we all know, and this is one more step. Actually, as expensive as it may be, And as challenging as it may be, it is a step in the right direction. And it sounds like our restaurants are in agreement that as a long-term solution, the parklets are a great idea. So I appreciate their effort, and it is not lost on us their dedication to creating an attractive environment in which to have their dining experience. So thank you very much.
So I just want to be aware that this is department reports, since these aren't agendized. So I know you'll get public comment on this item at the end, but I just want to be aware that we don't get into too much of a back and forth on this one. Okay, thanks, Cadence. So the other things that we wanted to do for department reports is I just want to let you know the EIFD, we've put together the Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District request for proposals for the infrastructure finance plan. So an EIFD RFP for an IFP. So that's making its way through the city review process right now. We hope to have that released in the next week or two. Time is of the essence for us. So I'll give you an update on that at a future meeting. We touched on parklets. I did want to say something, this isn't downtown specific, but Montgomery Village has a new owner. And what is typical in malls is they lose tenants so they can do the upgrades and regain tenants. I want to give you an update on the change. I did make the edits to the subcommittee purpose statement. I can send that out just as an addendum to the next meeting. I didn't add it for this, but I captured all of your changes that you asked for in the purpose statement last time. And then lastly, on our department reports, Tara Thompson has an update from the public art program.
Thanks, Raisa. Good morning, Mayor Rogers and Member Sawyer. So I will provide just some quick updates on the public art program and the projects we have going on in the downtown. For the Unum sculpture in Courthouse Square, there unfortunately have been additional delays with the artist submitting her engineering final budget and her final design to us. So installation is now looking more like the end of this year. There were delays with materials coming from various places in the world, and scheduling conflicts with the fabricator. So it's just been slower in our COVID and the climate of the world right now. But we are currently working on finalizing the text for the plaque and other installation details. For the 5th Street parking garage mural, the mural was completely installed in June, but we have scheduled a dedication event for this August 19th, so coming up in a couple weeks. So please mark your calendars, August 19th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. The Art and Public Places Committee will be hosting a dedication event. We'll be closing down a small section of Orchard Street right in front of the mural right there to have a short celebration. And more details will be shared soon. For our ongoing conservation and maintenance, over this last several months, extensive repairs to the Dragon tile mural on the Prince Memorial Greenway have taken place, and now the piece is finally stabilized. There had been damage due to vandalism and some homeless encampment activity along the path there. For the Asawa art panels, Artworks Foundry has had, unfortunately, extensive delays due to COVID outbreaks and have had to shut down several times. So we are expecting to have the engineering for the panels and the attachment of the panels to the fountain completed by Monday, August 8th. And a timeline for the rest of the project should be generated shortly thereafter, hopefully this week. For Live at Juilliard, just wanted to invite all the community members to come out. We have 3 more concerts for this summer. The first 3 have been really successful. Great music in the park, great attendance. There are 3 more happening Sundays 5 to 7 through August 21st. And if you want to see the lineup, you can go to srcity.org/live@Juilliard, or you can check out our Out There Santa Rosa social media channels. So thank you. That's all I have, and happy to answer any questions.
John, any questions?
No questions. Excellent report, and thanks, Tara.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to getting that timeline this next week.
You and everyone else.
I know.
I think we're asked daily. That's it for the department reports.
What Raisa doesn't understand is that I have a recurring text message set up that just goes out to her every other day asking about it.
And then on the off days, other people do that.
Yeah. Let's go to public comment then on department reports.
I don't know if she's still on, but Chris had her hand
I
up.
saw Chris's hand pop up and then disappear.
There she, no, somebody new.
All right, let's go to Victoria.
And Victoria, just one moment. Victoria, you have permission to speak if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this report about the Juilliard Park concert series. And I was wondering what accommodations are there for disabled. I have a friend who can't walk very well or for very long. And I was just wondering if there's anything there.
And I apologize, Victoria, maybe it was on my end. You seem to have cut out. So if you could repeat the question, I can have staff respond when we come back.
I think
Yes.
I got it. It's, the question is, are there accommodations for ADA accommodations?
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead, see if there's any other hands, and then I'll have staff go ahead and answer.
We have no additional hands raised at this time.
Perfect. Raisa, Tara, who wants to take that one?
I can address that. Thank you. So we did get requests from members of the public last week at the concert series for this. So we're already working with risk management to make sure we're providing appropriate accommodations. There are paved pathways throughout the park, and we can provide some kind of temporary seating for folks right near the paved pathways. So I think that's what our plan is, but we're making sure we're accommodating this correctly.
Okay, thank you. John, anything additional to add?
No, thank you, Mayor. Good job.
All right. Raisa, do you want to go over future agenda planning?
Yeah, it's mostly a question for you. Is there anything, I've noted a couple of things. We can certainly come back on parklets. I can't find my notes on the other things that I noted. I think the dashboard item might be going to council before this, but if it isn't, then we can bring it here first as well. But is there anything in particular that you were interested in seeing that that I should know?
Yeah, so the dashboard, I believe, is coming to council August 23rd, I think was the date. So it will be before our next meeting. So it may or may not be worth doing a small demonstration or a quick demonstration on the agenda. I'll leave that to you and the chair to determine and work with the DAO and others on issues. John, anything else on your end?
No, just thank you, Mayor. Just thanks to Cadence and to Chris, even though we didn't hear specifically from her, and the staff. Your plate is full, and I appreciate all the efforts in making our downtown what we know it will be in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to echo those comments. And maybe it's just because it's summer, maybe it's because we're emerging more from the pandemic. But I do find myself being pulled to downtown and Railroad Square, if not daily, then every couple of days. And it just seems like there's always something that's happening. There's a buzz that's going on, and so it does feel like things are trending in the right direction. I want to thank folks for their efforts on that.
Right, that's it then. That's the agenda.
All right, let's see if there's any public comment for future agenda items.
We have no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn.